Have you ever spent your entire Saturday deep cleaning, organizing every shelf and styling your living room to look exactly like a glossy magazine cover? Only to wake up feeling completely exhausted and watch the whole house somehow get messy again by Monday morning? It feels like an endless battle. We are constantly told that a perfect, spotless, and symmetrical home is the only way to truly find peace and relaxation after a long week. You buy more organizers, you hide every flaw, and you stress over every single item out of place. It takes so much of your precious time. But I want you to pause and ask yourself a question. What if the relentless pursuit of that perfection is exactly what is quietly stealing your energy? In the West, we are conditioned to hide scratches, throw away slightly faded rugs, and feel deeply guilty when our homes look actually lived in. We treat natural wear and tear as a personal failure. But in Japan, the most peaceful, calming homes are maintained with an entirely different mindset. Instead of hiding the marks of time, they practice something incredibly beautiful called Wabi-Sabi. It is the ancient art of finding. Wabi-Sabi teaches that a home is a living, breathing entity. The small chips, the faded fabrics, and the worn wood are not flaws to be fixed. They are the quiet, authentic marks of a life well lived. A perfectly sterile home is a museum, but I realized my own home was draining my energy. So, I decided to try living the Wabi-Sabi way for a single week, just to see what happens. I stopped covering up the scratches. I stopped trying to force everything into perfect, unnatural symmetry. And I honestly wasn't ready for how much calm it brought into my life. The heavy mental load I had been carrying for years just started to evaporate. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like a stressed manager of my own house. I felt like I belonged there. Stay with me for the rest of this journey, because this one simple Japanese mindset shift will completely change how you view your home forever. Day 1 of this one-week Japanese challenge started with what felt like the hardest step for me: stopping the endless cover-up. Like many of us in the West, I used to constantly throw a heavy, decorative runner over my dining table, just to hide a few natural scratches from years of family meals. And it wasn't just the table. I intentionally hid the chipped coffee mugs at the very back of the cabinet, embarrassed for anyone to see them. We are conditioned to treat these everyday signs of use, these little marks of life, as personal failures or signs of a poorly kept home. But the Japanese philosophy of Wabi-Sabi teaches us something incredibly free. A worn wooden table isn't ruined just because it has a few dents. Those marks actually hold the beautiful history of countless family dinners and shared moments. Even a chipped ceramic cup has its own unique character. It tells a story of being held, washed, and loved over many quiet morning coffees. So my very first physical challenge on day 1 was to go around the house and gently remove those unnecessary covers. It felt strange at first. I folded up the table runner and put it away. For the first time in years, I just let the scratches on the wood breathe. I started to think about the elders I saw in Japan. In a traditional Japanese home, they don't rush to Amazon to replace an aging chair. Instead, they take a soft cloth and they carefully polish it. They appreciate its long service and the comfort it has provided to their family. They understand that taking care of older things is a form of respect. By simply allowing my own home to honestly show its true age, an incredibly heavy, invisible burden started to lift off my shoulders. The constant daily anxiety, I slowly realized I didn't have to be the exhausted manager of a pristine, untouchable museum anymore. That was never the true goal of homemaking. I was just a person, living comfortably in a warm space that held my memories. And you know what? It was the most liberating feeling. By day 3, I realized something much deeper was happening to my stress levels. The physical cover-ups were gone, but the mental weight remained. There is actual science behind this exhaustion. A well-known 2009 study from UCLA looked at the way we describe our living spaces. Researchers found that women who described their homes as cluttered or full of unfinished projects actually had unhealthier daily patterns of cortisol. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. When your eyes are constantly scanning piles of stuff, your brain never fully rests. It is always working. But here is the most crucial distinction I had to learn. There is a massive difference between clutter and imperfection. They are not the same. Wabi-Sabi is never an. Japanese elders maintain their spaces with deep respect. They clear away the unnecessary visual noise, but they do not obsess over absolute newness. They will happily clear the clutter off a shelf, but they will lovingly keep the slightly faded, old cushion sitting right next to it. When you remove the actual clutter, your cognitive load drops immediately.
Your heart rate lowers.
The space finally has room to breathe and settle. So my goal for day 3 was to tackle the real problem. Not the scratches, but the unnecessary piles of things demanding my attention. I took a box and started clearing the unread magazines, the decorative items I didn't even like, and the random papers stacked everywhere. As the physical surfaces in my home began to clear, I could literally feel the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen up. A calmer, more spacious home can absolutely mean a calmer mind, but only when you stop fighting the natural aging process of your space. You don't need a perfectly pristine, modern house to find peace. You just need a space that isn't constantly overwhelming your nervous system. But simply moving a few magazines was just the beginning. To truly invite Wabi-Sabi into my home, I had to understand the power of empty space. On day 4 of my Wabi-Sabi week, I decided to tackle the shelves. In Western decor, we are often told to fill every single empty corner, with matching sets, symmetrical items, or generic decorations we bought on sale, just to avoid having empty space. But the Japanese way embraces a beautiful concept called ma, which simply translates to negative space. Wabi-Sabi. A shelf packed with generic items creates visual noise that quietly drains your energy. But a mostly empty shelf. So I decided to follow the 80% rule used in many Japanese homes. You never fill a shelf, a closet, or a room by intentionally leaving at least 20% of the space completely bare. You allow the room to feel light, airy, and free of unnecessary pressure. I took a deep breath and started removing exactly half of the generic decorations I had accumulated over the years. Suddenly, the few imperfect items that remained, like a slightly irregular clay bowl or a when you stop crowding your vision with perfectly symmetrical objects, your eyes can finally rest. The decision fatigue drops almost instantly. My home stopped screaming for my attention and started wrapping me in quiet, undisturbed comfort. The empty space felt. In traditional Japanese architecture, this empty space is actually considered the most important part of the room. It allows the sunlight to move freely, and it gives your mind a quiet place to wander. It is an intentional pause in our incredibly busy modern lives. I sat on my sofa and just stared at the cleared shelf. I didn't feel the urge to go buy something new to fill the gap. I realized that by doing absolutely nothing and just leaving the space alone, I had added more value to my home than any expensive decorations. Creating this empty space prepared my mind for the next major Wabi-Sabi lesson. What to do when things inevitably break. Day 5 introduced me to the beautiful mindset of kintsugi. You might know it as the famous Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with liquid gold. But kintsugi is much more than just a repair technique. It is a philosophy that treats breakage and repair as part of an object's unique history. Instead of disguising the damage or throwing the item away, the repair is illuminated. The flaw actually becomes the most beautiful part of the piece. I didn't have any gold lacquer lying around, but I wanted to apply this healing mindset to my own home. I started with my frayed blanket. Normally, the moment I saw a tear or a frayed edge, I would feel a rush of frustration and immediately open Amazon to buy a replacement. We are so used to discarding anything that is no longer perfectly intact. We treat our belongings as completely disposable the moment they show any age. But when we constantly buy new things to maintain an illusion of a perfect life, we stay trapped in an exhausting cycle of mindless consumerism. In Japan, taking the time to gently care for your belongings with your own hands is considered a very grounding form of daily mindfulness and respect. So, instead of throwing my favorite old blanket away, I simply sat down on the sofa, found a needle and thread, and began to mend it. As I focused on carefully stitching the fabric back together, something amazing happened. My racing thoughts slowed down, and I felt mending an imperfect item is actually a way of mending our own patience. It forces you to slow down and appreciate what you already have. When you actively repair something, you are subconsciously telling yourself that it is completely okay to be broken, and that healing is a worthy process. This simple act of gentle care completely shifts your relationship with your environment. Your home transforms from a demanding showroom. By the end of the afternoon, the blanket was fixed. The stitches were visibly imperfect, but it felt much more valuable to me than before. Learning to embrace those small repairs actually prepared me for day 6, where I discovered how the Japanese completely rethink the way they bring nature indoors. By day 6 of my Wabi-Sabi challenge, I realized my relationship with nature indoors was also completely flawed. They would look absolutely beautiful for about 3 days, and then they would start to wilt. Every dropping petal just felt like a sad reminder. Instead of enjoying them, I would just feel a deep sense of guilt and rush to throw them away, perpetuating this endless cycle of buying temporary perfection. But Wabi-Sabi teaches us to deeply appreciate the natural, asymmetrical cycles of life. In a traditional Japanese home, they might simply place a single, slightly crooked branch in a rustic vase. It is a quiet, profoundly beautiful acceptance of the natural cycle of life and decay. The irregularity of the branch is when you stop demanding perfection from nature, your home suddenly feels much more grounded. You stop fighting the passage of time. This profound respect for the imperfect beauty of the natural world brings a unique stillness to a room. It asks for nothing, yet instead of driving back to the florist to buy more expensive roses, I simply opened my back door and walked outside to my own garden. I completely stopped looking for the most perfect, unblemished flower in bloom. Instead, I brought this humble little branch inside and placed it in a small, simple vase right on my newly cleared table. I didn't try to arrange it, but just let nature sit exactly as it was. And to my absolute surprise, it completely changed the entire feeling and atmosphere of my living room. It felt wonderfully unforced. There were no perfectly arranged petals demanding my attention. Looking at that simple, imperfect branch sitting proudly on my scratch table reminded me of something very important. It reminded me that I, too, am allowed to age, to change, and to be imperfect. We do not have to be in flawless bloom every single day. On the morning of day 7, I woke up, walked into my living room, and immediately felt a profound, deeply unexpected shift in my energy. My home was certainly not magazine perfect. The wooden floorboards still creaked slightly. The dining table still clearly displayed its many scratches and dents. The sofa was still slightly faded from the sun. But for the very first time in years, the entire house actually felt like a true sanctuary. I wasn't anxiously scanning the room for every tiny flaw to fix. I wasn't criticizing myself for not keeping up with impossible modern standards. I wasn't drafting a stressful mental to-do list before I even had my morning coffee. The heavy pressure to perform for my house was completely gone. In the West, we often clean so hard on weekends that we exhaust ourselves. Then we inevitably fall behind by Wednesday and feel deeply guilty again. The Japanese way, however, maintains the home with a little bit of quiet care every single day. But more importantly, it accepts the passage of time. Wabi-Sabi teaches us that as things age, they gather character and soul. They do not lose their value just because they lose their original factory shine. By simply removing the clutter and allowing my imperfect belongings to breathe, I had completely changed my emotional relationship with the space I live in. When you finally stop fighting your home and stop hiding its honest history, it finally becomes the relaxing, welcoming place of rest you always wanted. The quiet, unspoken joy of Wabi-Sabi is simply letting things be enough. Your home is absolutely allowed to look like human beings actually live there. You do not need to constantly upgrade, replace, or hide your life behind decorative covers. You are allowed to just sit down and be exactly present. As I drank my coffee that morning, looking at the crooked branch on my scratched table, I realized the house was finally taking care of me. It wasn't demanding my entire weekend. It wasn't asking me to spend money. It was just offering a warm, quiet, deeply forgiving space to exist in. This profound sense of calm is exactly what happens when you trade the exhausting pursuit of perfection for the gentle, healing embrace of Wabi-Sabi living. If you are over 50, you have spent enough of your life managing things, constantly organizing, and trying to meet impossible modern standards of perfection. Your home should be the one place in the entire world where you absolutely do not have to perform or keep up appearances for anyone. Please remember, this is simply general well-being information inspired by beautiful Japanese traditions, shared to help you find a little more daily peace and calm. Your homework for tonight is incredibly simple, but it might actually feel quite difficult at first, because it goes against everything we were previously taught. I want you to intentionally find just one single area in your home, maybe your dining table, a favorite chair, or a small crowded bookshelf. Gently remove the items or decorative covers you use to hide its age. Stop trying to cover up the completely natural wear and tear. Instead, let the beautiful empty space and the authentic, lovely imperfections just breathe. A clean, naturally aging home is never a sign of failure. It is actually a beautiful, quiet testament. Every single scratch on that table is a family meal shared. Every faded, mended thread is a precious memory of deep comfort and lasting warmth. Try to treat your living space not as an exhausting chore, but as a quiet, daily act of kindness and respect to your future self. If this simple Japanese mindset shift helped you breathe a little easier today, please consider leaving a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so our next quiet, peaceful lifestyle habit can easily find its way to you next time. It is finally time to let the exhausting, heavy illusion of absolute perfection completely go. You do not need to prove anything to anyone anymore. You have worked hard, you have lived fully, and you have truly earned this profound, beautiful, and deeply forgiving sense of peace in your home. Thank you so much for sharing your precious time and your quiet morning with me today. Take a deep breath, relax, and rest well tonight.